So you can either be pro-Palestinian, or you can be pro-human rights, or you can be anti-Israeli. If you're pro-Palestinian, then you'll do everything you can to help the Palestinians in the Palestinian arena. But in that case, you're still going to act out against anybody who violates their rights.
Including Hamas, including the Palestinian Authority.
And if you had to choose an order in which to go against, you would make a list of all those who violate their rights. You would go to some neutral party who would provide that list for you, and you would checklist. Top of the list is those who violate the most, bottom of the least, and you start from the top and you work your way to the bottom.
That's if you're pro-Palestinian.
That's if you're pro-Palestinian. So if you're pro-Palestinian, you still shouldn't put Israel on top of the list, because Israel's not the worst violator of human rights to the Palestinians. Hamas is, according to the UN. Hamas is, right? And according to Amnesty. So that covers the whole issue of if you're pro-Palestinian.
So if I'm pro-human rights?
Well, if you're pro-human rights, it gets even better. Because then, it's a micro to the macro. In the micro, you were pro-Palestinian, you still went out against those who violated the worst way against the Palestinians. Now you shifted to being you're not just pro-Palestinian, you're pro-human rights.
Right.
Then I'm going to ask you, which cause are you going to choose to fight for? Obviously you can't fight for all of them. I mean, you're a student, you have limited time.
Yes.
Which cause would you go for? Would you choose the cause that relates to Israel and Palestinians? Would you choose the cause that relates to what's happening in Darfur?
Well,
would you choose China?
Well, logically, I'll take the person who makes more human rights violations.
Well, here it's not people. Here it's like countries.
Well, the countries or the entities.
So I want to be clear. So if you define yourself pro-human rights, then first of all, you're not limited to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yes.
And then if you decided to choose to deal with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it would beg the question, why? If there are 7 million Israelis and 3 million Palestinians, and let's say, for example, there are 3 million Palestinians because they're the ones that are suffering, you would have to look at the degree of the severity of the violations and the scope of the violations, meaning how many people it affects. You have 3 million Palestinians, hundreds of thousands of already dead in Sudan, and 1.6 billion Chinese suffering the worst form of human rights, I think probably in the history, maybe paralleled by Stalin.
So what you want to tell me is that if I choose the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I'm anti-Israel and not pro-human rights.
Well, no, not necessarily, but I would say that you are pro-Palestinian and not necessarily human rights. Because you can choose the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and then deal with the Palestinians in the name of human rights. But if you chose that over other causes that have a bigger scope of violations, I would say that you decided to focus on the Palestinians, and we've now reverted back to you being a pro-Palestinian, which is okay. We said, even if you're pro-Palestinian, we talked about that. But if you're pro-human rights, then I would estimate that in the spirit of neutral decision-making, you would have to try and map out all the cases around the world where there are human rights violations. Once again, go to the United Nations. Because if you're condemning somebody because they violate human rights, then you position yourself in the name of human rights. And then it begs the question, why are you condemning Israel and not condemning Hamas and not condemning China or anybody else? But if you're condemning Israel only because it's Israel, then I would say you're not a pro-human rights activist, but more an anti-Israel activist.